Alright, so this final part is going to be looking at functions with for in loops. We're going to introduce a way to iterate through an array simply by calling a function rather than having to create this for in loop every single time. So we're going to use this to iterate through an array of strings in our combine strings function, and we're just going to combine all of the strings in this array into one long string and return it, and then we'll print it out to make sure it all works. Alright, so now we're going to take a look at a function with a for in loop in it. Okay, so this is going to loop through this array. It's going to be a string array, and it's just going to combine all of the elements into one long string. Okay, so we want this to combine all elements of the array into one string. Okay, and we're just going to call this function combine strings. Okay, so we've already had a combine strings function. I know it's not an original name, but that's fine. So what we're going to do is we're going to have this take in an array. So this is going to be it's going to take in what we'll call a string array, and this is going to be not ints, it's going to be strings. I guess I should put the colon there. Okay, and should we have a return type? I think we should. So let's just have it return a single string, which is going to be the result of all of them combined. Okay, so the first thing we should do before we fill in the body of this function is we should create a string array. In fact, no, we don't have to create a string array. Let's just leave it blank for now. So we could either create a string array and pass it in as a parameter, or we could just specify some values in there. So what are we going to do? Well, we have to set up our for in loop. And again, for those of you who haven't seen a for in loop tutorial, I really recommend you go ahead and do that, because for in loops are a very important way to kind of iterate through the same code many times. Alright, so they're really, really useful stuff, and I'll just do a brief recap of what's going on with them. So we're going to say an index in, we'll go from 0 to, let's say, the array length. So this is going to be string array dot length, which I guess should be dot count -1. I'm just going to, there we go. Then we're going to perform this function here. So I know index isn't used, and that's what the warning here is. Okay, that's fine. So just summarize what's going on here. For those of you who haven't seen the for in loop before, we're using the variable index, or the constant index. We're going from when index is 0 to when index is the length of the array -1. And the reason we do that is because if we go to the length of the array, then it's going to actually include one more element than the array is long, which will give us an error. Okay, so we're going to iterate through this array, the string array, and we're just going to combine all of the strings. So we're going to say string array of index equal, and actually we're going to create a string variable, so let's go ahead and do that now. So let's create this constant, and actually it should be a variable, I guess. We'll call this combined string, and it will be of type string. We're not going to give it a value. Actually, let's just give it an empty value right now. And so we're going to say that combine string plus equals string array of index plus, I guess, let's have a comma and a space separating everything. Okay, so what we're going to do is before we run this, again, we have a string array that we're taking in. So we can either make a string array in advance and pass that in, or we can just create a string array on the spot when we call the function. And it's going to return this string. Okay, and return combined string. So yeah, it's going to create that. We're going to create this variable combined string that again exists only as scope of the function. And actually, that's one thing I should say as a side note, is that if we're creating variables within functions, they exist only within the scope of the function. So if I call the value of combined string here, combined string, let's see, just waiting for it, there we get the error because combined string does not exist outside of the scope of this function. And this is what we'll call a local variable versus a global variable. So the string str here is a global variable because it exists outside of the scope of all functions, and we can call it and use it time and time again. So once it's assigned a value, it will always take that value unless reassigned. A local variable, however, only exists in this case within this function, so if we try and call outside of the function, it doesn't exist. Okay? So just bear that in mind. If you're creating variables within functions, you usually won't be able to use them outside of the function unless you pass them in as parameters. Okay? So yeah, so we're returning the string. The string is going to be a combined string. And we're just saying we're going to iterate through the array starting at index 0 and going until the length -1. And we're just going to say combined string equals whatever it was before plus the string array of that index, so rather the element at that particular index within the string array, plus this comma and a space, so that they're not all bunched together. Okay, and then we're just going to return that combined string, and yeah, we can print that out or something. So let's go ahead and call this combined strings, and we'll pass it a string array. So let's just give it something like, let's give it the days of the week again. Tuesday, and then Wednesday, and then Thursday. Geez, I really can't type today. And then Friday. Okay? Cool. So, what is this going to do? Well, we've passed it now this array of strings. And so this is our parameter. The input parameter is going to be the string array. It's going to contain the weekdays Monday through Friday. It's going to create this variable combined string, and then it's going to iterate through our string array starting at 0 and ending at the length -1. And it's basically going to say combined string equals, well, first it's an empty string plus the string array at that index. So it's going to go through and it's going to say it's Monday plus, and then it's going to go to the next iteration. It's going to add this comma and the space, and then Tuesday, and then the comma and the space, and then Wednesday, and then Thursday, and then Friday. And then it's going to return this combined string. So if we want, we can print out the results. So we can store this in a variable, or we can simply say print combined strings, and it should take in that final string and print it out. So just going to wait for it to run here. And there we go. Excellent. So we get the days of the week printed out. This probably shouldn't be here, but you know, we can fix that if we really want by putting in a conditional. Okay, so here we go. This is an example of a function with a for-in loop. So let's just go over what's happening again. So we call it combined strings because that's what it's doing. Again, take in the string array, which we passed here, which is just the 5 days of the week. It created this combined string variable, which is just a blank string, and then it iterated over every element in the array starting at 0 ending at the length -1, and it just basically added, each time it iterated, it added the next element onto the end of the current string, combined string, and added in this comma and then the space, and then at the end it returned basically the array all combined into one string. Okay, and then I just called the print function on it to print out the new string that contains the entire array as one string. Okay, so this is a good example of where you could use for-in loops in a function. And again, so much easier to call this than to have to type out this every single time to create this variable, create the for-in loop, create this return type. Much easier just to create it once here and then to be able to call it many times. Okay, so that's pretty much it for our functions tutorial. This next part will just be a wrap-up and a summary. Okay, so this was the final part of our tutorial other than the outro, and it's just going to focus on, we focused on functions with for in loops. So we used the combined strings function, and that basically took in a string array, and it took every single string in that array and added them together using this for in loop in the function itself. So we'd seen for in loops outside of functions, but a lot of times within the code you'll actually get complaints that a for in loop is not inside of a function. Okay, and also having the loop inside of the function itself was another example of how much easier it is just to make this function once that performs this task, and then to call the function itself many times rather than having to type out that whole code for the loop many times. Okay, so this is why functions are so great, because you can just call them as many times as you want. You just have to write out the long gritty code once, and yeah, and then you can use it over and over again, and it just makes things so much easier and faster.